It's an honor to be here with you here today. I'm David Gadsden, and I lead Esri's outreach to nonprofit organizations. I joined Esri in 2002. And over the course of the past 15 years, I've seen some amazing examples of nonprofits and global organizations applying GIS to make a real difference in the world. I've been asked to be with you here today to share just a few of those examples. I'd also like to just highlight some of the current developments of the ArcGIS platform that we're very excited about. And again, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to be here, especially with you, part of a global GIS community. Your work is extremely important, regardless of the types of organizations that you're representing. Applying these tools to better manage our resources, provide better transparency for our partners and potentially our constituents, is making a real difference. And we have the opportunity and the work with our partners around the world, such as Esri Finland, to really see the impact of some of this work. And that work matters in light of the challenges that we're facing globally. As you all know, anytime that you watch the news, there are some very serious and increasingly perplexing challenges facing not only humanity, but biodiversity across the planet, the impacts of climate change, and very serious, very complex issues. Now, at the same time, our world is undergoing a massive digital transformation. Technologies are increasingly capable, they're increasingly affordable, and that's leading us to an opportunity whereby if we can continue to combine a geographic approach to problem solving together with these new technologies, we can empower an approach that we think of at Esri as the science of where. Now, the science of where is not a new concept that was invented by Esri. It's really decades, even centuries of geography and geographic science that's being brought to life today through geographic information systems. So that technology and the basis of that science is really our mission at Esri, to bring the science of where to organizations like yours, and to do everything we can to help you be successful. Now, GIS is advancing rapidly, as I mentioned. Not only the capabilities of these new sensors, the proliferation of these new sensors, including devices that likely every one of you are carrying today, which are extremely powerful relative to tools that even 10 years ago we would have made a massive investment just to have in our offices, right? That those tools, together with the capability of managing big data, of analyzing large data sets, making sense and finding insight from that volume of content, is something that we're extremely excited about today. And there are many different ways that geography can be observed, managed, studied, analyzed. Patterns can be revealed. Events can be identified more rapidly in a real-time fashion, that today is perhaps one of the most exciting times ever to be part of this field and part of this industry. By embracing these tools, we've been able to really move into a WebGIS environment. By embracing cloud computing, by taking the fundamentals of enterprise GIS, which Esri has carefully built up by working with organizations like your own for over 48 years. By moving into the cloud, we can make simple exploratory mapping tools that are powerful, yet easy to use and applicable to a much larger community of users. So smart mapping, for example, allows us to take spreadsheets and content that may come off of one of these sensors I mentioned and make intelligent, informative, and well-structured cartographic products without having to necessarily teach everyone how to be a cartographer, without that deep study that's needed to be successful in representing that information. Now, as you all know, the analysis of spatial information has always been a very fundamental capability within the Esri platform. This WebGIS approach allows us to take spatial analysis to scale so that we are directly connecting in a real-time manner to these large data feeds, so that we are participating in other analytical services, such as those that might be coming from the R community or other analytical packages, in an integrated, web services-oriented, connected manner. And we're extremely excited about those new capabilities. But perhaps the most significant impact of WebGIS is being able to extend the powerful capabilities of GIS to a much broader community of users through apps. So rather than starting to use GIS by learning a complete desktop product that is highly capable but requires a significant amount of orientation and training, as you work across your organizations, you can provide focused applications that allow decision makers to see the dashboards that they need, or your community at large to work through story maps that may incorporate videos or photographs or infographics. So it's not just the map anymore. The map really becomes an informative feed into a more holistic storytelling medium with story maps. And there are many examples of new applications that are available for you today, not to have to build from scratch, but rather to configure, to make appropriate for that community of users in a much more affordable and a much more rapid manner. Now, those changes to the platform, the evolution of that ArcGIS platform, means today that GIS is not only relevant to individual experts or the organizations or departments that are using these tools, but are actually applicable to entire communities. Now, one of the things that we're most excited about at Esri is the new opportunity for GIS to provide the basis for collaboration. And in light of the challenges that we're facing, really this technology development couldn't come at a better time. So one example is a concept that we call the Hub. Now, the Hub was developed initially as a project with the City of Los Angeles, and it allowed a better approach to enterprise GIS within the city. There were many departments. Those departments had specific authoritative data layers which were needed for the appropriate functioning of that government. Things were working well. The WebGIS approach helped that enterprise work a little bit better, helped that data to become more discoverable, helped to really empower the providers within that city. But that's just the beginning of the Hub. The Hub takes that WebGIS approach and it provides a secondary portal which is actually used to provide applications out to the community of citizens and nonprofits and academics across the City of Los Angeles that really need access to that authoritative data, that open data from the city, but can use that in their own applications to conduct surveys, collect observations about how city programs are performing, make suggestions to the city, and participate in broader initiatives. In the case of the City of Los Angeles, those initiatives include challenges of keeping the streets clean, challenges around reducing deaths of cyclists in traffic situations. So rather than the city working in isolation, the Hub allows the GIS to be extended in a manner that really there is broad participation. And so this is my hope, this is the message that I hope to convey today. I want you to begin to imagine GIS not as just an enterprise tool, not as just an expert tool, but actually a platform that can support engagement to address much larger problems. As I mentioned, over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to witness some amazing projects by both nonprofits and global organizations. One was the challenge of eradicating polio in Africa and predominantly in Nigeria. This was one of the last places on the continent where the polio virus was still advancing. Now, in order to eradicate polio, you must vaccinate every child under 5 years old. Now, in Nigeria, there are over 36 million children in that age group. And despite extensive efforts and massive investments, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments, in order to send vaccination teams across the country, the virus was still advancing. The vaccination teams were using hand-drawn maps. They had a very efficient organizational structure to inform the teams and send them into the field. But the fact is, there wasn't the basis for appropriate planning, and there was no accountability as to the performance of those teams that was able to validate that they were actually reaching the children. So Esri, in working with the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, Gates Foundation, Rotary, UNICEF, and many others, very quickly built a very high-resolution GIS for the country of Nigeria, in which every settlement was mapped. Every city was divided into grid cells. Every hamlet, every small cluster of homes was buffered in a way that we had an accounting system then for where those children might be. That information provided the basis for the vaccination planning teams to make very accurate plans about where they would go. That commitment, their commitment to visit those places was confirmed by their use of a mobile device that actually tracked their performance. So as they visited this landscape, we now had a real-time dashboard that showed what areas had been covered and what areas had been missed. That was then the basis for follow-on vaccination work. And in 2015, this work really began in 2012 and carried through for a number of years. In 2015, the polio virus, there was no instance of the polio virus in Nigeria. Now, sadly, because of the political instability in the north, we still have cases of polio, literally fewer than you can count on one hand. But this technology was integral in providing the basis for addressing that extremely complex problem in an extremely difficult operational environment. Now, that work continued with WHO and other partners, leading into the Ebola crisis. And the relationships that Esri and our partners had established to support these organizations during these types of emergencies was critical. So when Ebola really became a crisis, we were brought on to work very directly with the World Health Organization. The challenge was very similar. There were cases being reported, and there was no accurate GIS of the place names, the locations of the facilities, the actual need. And so the challenge was to very quickly and very rapidly provide a GIS reference for the affected geography that was used by the WHO to help better track and manage the information that was coming in surrounding this crisis. And in the words of the leadership there, it was essential in helping them allocate resources to the right location. We've hosted a variety of other nonprofit organizations that, Partners in Health, for example, that leverage these maps in order to implement clinics in the right location where they'll be working for decades to come. Now, one example of that work with these organizations was not just helping them with current technology. We identified in the Ebola work that there was actually a need for a new survey tool. It wasn't, it certainly wasn't ArcPad, it wasn't quite Collector, right? We had a missing sort of survey capability that was a very light collection activity that could be used in the field and configured and deployed very simply to support this type of work. And so Survey 123, which is a mobile data collection solution I hope that you've heard of and are familiar with, was actually developed as a response to the work on Ebola. In this case, in working on immunization for polio in Iraq, the World Health Organization did a train-the-trainer activity over the web to the team in Iraq. They conducted over 60,000 polio surveys in the course of less than a week. And that led to a very efficient real-time dashboard where in Geneva, the WHO could actually track and monitor that work. So there's sort of a lineage here of working with these organizations, not only just providing current technology or support for that technology, but learning about those requirements and making new tools available. And really, that's how Esri works. We're not just sitting back in a vacuum coming up with technology that we feel is interesting. There is a very tight dialogue between Esri and the user community that is truly genuine and goes back to the very beginning of the organization. I've heard our president describe many times organizational milestones by which the community expressed their needs, and Esri took that information to heart and developed new technology. And we want to really encourage that dialogue, both directly with Esri and with our partners here in Finland. Now, another global challenge are the remnants of war that are left over after humanitarian conflict. So over 60 countries still have landmines in the ground, a hidden danger. There's not knowledge by the local community of where these explosive ordnance are currently lying. This photograph of the man pointing into the hole is a anti-tank mine as a remnant from the Vietnam War that was actually run over just last year. So there is still this threat, and the problem is that these ordnance are not just in obscure locations. They're in very highly valuable agricultural lands. They're in areas that are needed for schools and other places, or collection of resources, typically by some of the most underprivileged members of those communities. So it's an incredible challenge. Now, the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining has been using GIS for over 20 years through a relationship that we've been involved with from the very beginning to build the information management system for mine action. And that, as it describes, is a complete information system that allows the mapping of the entire country, prioritization of the land use so that the clearance activities can take place in the most effective locations in order to open up that land for those communities. This is a very strong relationship. It's an exemplary organization, and as you might imagine, precision matters when you're working with the challenge like clearing unexploded ordnance. Nonprofits like the Halo Trust are actually the ones that are out there removing the mines. And that's a different workflow, a different part of resolving that challenge, whereby site-level plans are drawn, meticulous activities or meticulous protocols are worked through so that their teams can safely remove those ordnance and clear confidently those land for those communities. In the photograph in the center here, those women are collecting water and returning to the village. Those stakes are where mines have been identified. And for years, they've been walking right through them on a very narrow pathway. So when that land is cleared, it fundamentally changes the sense of well-being and the safety of those communities. It's very real, and it's geography truly making a difference. As you all know, natural disasters continue to increase around the world in light of climate change, unpredictable events like earthquakes. This chart represents the increase in billion-dollar disasters of various types around the world. This is very real in the United States for us now, as well as everywhere else. Now, Esri has a disaster response program by which anyone can contact us when they're in an emergency, and we'll provide whatever technology they need for months. Now, as time passes, we'll determine the right Esri program in which to support them, but the point is, Esri is a strong partner in times of need, and there is a long track record, actually, of disasters that have taken place where not only is the licensing made available, but Esri will actually formulate teams to respond to those emergencies. Now, one example, of course, is the horrible events of 9/11 in New York City. Now, in that example, when the Twin Towers collapsed, there were multiple city departmental systems that did not communicate with one another. So when Esri sent a team to help that response environment, what they needed to build nearly immediately was an enterprise GIS capability so that the infrastructure and the planning and the city could actually communicate together. So my point is, enterprise GIS not only leads to better efficiencies within your organizations, but especially in times of disaster and stress, it's extremely important to have those relationships. And that work in New York City has now led to a very robust and a very efficient enterprise platform to support that very large and complex geography. Now, as you might imagine, conservation is very fundamental to our thinking in the nonprofit space at Esri. I'll speak in a moment about our president and some of their commitments to conservation, but from the very beginning, the use of mapping for natural resource management was very fundamental in the very early days of Esri, even before we had software products. Back when the Environmental Systems Research Institute was working on projects with natural resources departments and building unique tools to build these operational systems for managing landscapes. That evolved into working on protected areas, setting boundaries for the areas that are most valuable to preserve, working on endangered species and habitat and connectivity in an increasingly fragmented world across the physical landscape. Esri supports a nonprofit organization that we helped found, which is called the Society for Conservation GIS. We host an event every summer just after our user conference in San Diego, and actually fund scholars to come in from around the world, working on very, very challenging issues in very low resources environments, and it's something that we're extremely proud of. I wanted to provide one example of another challenge where GIS and the platform made a fundamental difference. So not many years ago, the president of Tanzania had a plan to build a road across the Serengeti. And the northern Serengeti, which borders Kenya and the Masai Mara, it's a connected ecosystem that has one of the largest migrations in the world of wildebeest that feed a fundamental part of a natural dynamic with many species in an incredible part of the world. A highway across that area would have really been devastating. And many international partners were highly critical of the Tanzanian government. They were not interested in hearing that feedback from the international community. And we wanted to participate in helping decision-making around this topic in this incredibly complex setting where the natural environment needed to be understood, but there's also a growing population in and around the park that had needs of their own well-being. So what we did, actually working with the Jane Goodall Institute, was to establish a WebGIS for the Serengeti. And what this allowed all of the organizations working in and around the Serengeti to do is to share with one another, not sensitive information, but fundamental information, boundaries, where there were existing roads, where there were existing facilities. You can see some examples of the data sets that were provided here. Now, this work was funded by the World Bank, the Jane Goodall Institute, and some of my colleagues and I were able to leverage this platform to help nonprofit organizations and wildlife management areas around the park that were run by the communities themselves leverage this WebGIS to better map and model those protected areas. So it was very much making this modern technology available. Now, we hear at different times that the cloud isn't appropriate for everyone. It's difficult to be connected. It's not really ready. And as one example, this WebGIS approach worked in rural Tanzania in 2012 with mobile devices that were connecting whenever they could connect into this system. So I feel very strongly that we're ready for the cloud, and in some cases, it's essential to leapfrog forward where implementing enterprise systems in the traditional sense is just too costly for various reasons. That was just one example of a conservation project. There are many conservation science initiatives which Esri contributes to, both the work of Don Wright, our chief scientist, work of our product teams, work of the Esri Living Atlas team, which helps make content available out through the ArcGIS platform. You'll see some other examples here of specific functional areas that really are not, these aren't just projects, these are communities of practice that we're trying to collaborate with to advance the field of geography. Now, one example is a new way to look at our world regarding the unique ecosystems that are present across the planet. So this project, in collaboration with the US Geological Survey, was to take 4 global data sets, bioclimate, landform, lithology, and land cover, which with many attributes underneath those incoming data sets, and actually to combine them into one of the first maps of the world of ecological land units. So this is a map that's freely available that discovered that there are 3,900 unique land unit types in the world. The app that's off to the right allows you to click anywhere in the world and find every other place that meets that same unique type of ecology. It's a fascinating tool, and it's used for large-scale landscape protection considerations and conservation considerations. I learned, for example, that the geography that I grew up in Washington State, in a very dry, arid environment, is actually nearly identical to Mongolia. And I was quite shocked to learn that. I was shocked to learn that in ways. and in other ways, it really made a lot of sense. Now, that's just one example. We continued that work, and we took advantage of the many data sets related to the natural environment that we have available in the United States, and we took that approach down to the parcel level. So with many inputs that define the characteristics of that landscape and the importance of connectedness between those available parcels, we built what we refer to as the green infrastructure map of the US. That map could have been used to expand national parks. That's what it was designed for. We missed our targeted political window in order to achieve that result, but it certainly has been made use by other conservation organizations which are trying to obtain land which connects some of the gaps between important habitats. So connectivity is a major part of that offering, and that's still underway. Another example is an accounting framework for the oceans. So much like ecological land units, Esri is working with a wide variety of partners and scientists to build an accounting system that is not only spatially appropriate for the oceans, but it involves both depth and time. So that salinity and dissolved oxygen and the fundamentals of ocean health can be aggregated based on inputs from many different organizations, many different sensors, and many different scientific institutions. So again, this is not a product from Esri. It's a collaboration with the conservation science community to provide a framework that will hopefully help advance complex challenges related to our seas. Now, sustainability is a major focus of our time together this week and the world around us at large. Now, I hope that you're all aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our vision is that geography is an integral tool for helping to monitor and measure those goals. Now, the goals themselves are very exhaustive. It's highly likely that each of your organization has goals, has key performance indicators that you're monitoring to try to achieve certain outcomes. Whether you're precisely using these goals or whether your work is related, chances are there is a relationship that your work could be mapped into this framework of 17 goals and the underlying indicators. What we've realized is that geography is already highly relevant to every one of the topical areas of those goals. So we can go through examples where, regardless of the goal, we have organizations that are out there that are leveraging GIS on that topic. But the opportunity is that we could actually leverage the current state of the ArcGIS platform to enable a federated monitoring system for sustainability that can take the work of nonprofit organizations that are focused on specific goals and challenges, national governments, national bureaus of statistics that are monitoring overall progress towards those goals, in addition to a global view of that progress, perhaps at the United Nations level. And that's actually happening. So the UN Statistics Division has implemented an Esri-based dashboard that has a fully articulated data model underneath it that allows you to go through each and every one of the goals and track the progress of work towards those, the progress and the current state of those indicators for a number of countries that you'll see listed here on the slide. So this is a federated architecture for global sustainability. It currently is focused on the national government level, leading up to the United Nations. This framework, this dashboard, this data model are all open source. They're all available on GitHub. So you can do a quick search for Esri SDG on GitHub, and you'll find this framework. Our hope is that you might take that framework and apply it in your own organization, whether that is a commercial, government, or nonprofit organization. But just a few examples of how this is being put to use. So monitoring health across Mexico. Looking at unemployment in Ireland. Understanding poverty in the Philippines. Now, each one of these web maps are again connected and structured in a way that they can be compared to different countries around the world globally.
and it's something that we're extremely excited about. This also leverages that hub concept that I mentioned earlier. So it's not just a national reporting system, it provides the basis of open data where other partners in the country can actually have focused applications that participate in projects to impact development towards the goals, and that can be summarized and shared upward in this framework. Now, it's not only nonprofits and governments that are doing this work or the United Nations. There are many corporations that leverage the ArcGIS platform for their own sustainability initiatives. Walgreens is a major pharmaceutical in the United States. They monitor the sale of cold medicine to look at flu outbreak, and they work with government health partners and others to look at health across their commercial network and their customers that they're serving. Starbucks has a GIS platform that reaches all the way to the fields in Rwanda in this example, and where they monitor the health and well-being of their farmers and their communities so that they have sustainability of their coffee supply chain that follows through all the way into their shops and stores. So we're very excited at Esri to see that process, technology, and people have the opportunity to come together to have a common approach to sustainability. There are many exemplary organizations that are working on sustainability. The goals for us represent a common language, a common accounting framework that have allowed us to put forward some templates for technology that we hope will be a contribution. We would love to see them widely adopted, and we're confident that they're meaningful. Now, we would love to see you at our international conference in San Diego. The goals have always been a major focus since they were announced, and we have actually, our team puts together an entire showcase with leading organizations that are working specifically on the goals and sharing their work in technology. So if you have the opportunity, please join us in July in San Diego, where we can continue this discussion. Now, nonprofits represent very special relationships to Esri, and that's because of the work they do, that's because of our shared values in making a difference in the world. You'll just see a few examples here. Now, I have the pleasure of administering the nonprofit program at Esri. Each one of these blue dots on the map are nonprofits around the world that are leveraging that very low-cost technology to make a difference. It's an extraordinary thing to be a part of. Just simply the action of reviewing these applications as they come in is extremely inspiring to see all of the different areas that nonprofits are trying to make a difference in, whether that's providing community services to people in need, whether that's animal welfare, whether that's protecting historic properties. It's really a very diverse and vast community. But it's not just nonprofits, it's really all GIS professionals, in my experience, want to make a positive difference. These individuals are part of an organization called the GIS Corps. And the GIS Corps was founded over 10 years ago to allow GIS professionals to share their expertise to a volunteer database so that nonprofits, the United Nations, and others, when they need help, they can ask the GIS Corps to place those volunteers onto projects. So now, more than a decade into this work, the GIS Corps has an incredible database of volunteers around the world. There are many volunteers based in Finland. I would encourage all of you, if you have the opportunity to volunteer and help out, to sign up. You can see an example of some of their projects. And this year, Esri made an additional commitment to the GIS Corps to provide all of their volunteers with personal use licensing. So rather than very carefully curated projects that the GIS Corps will do the matchmaking to place the volunteer into, every one of those volunteers can go work for a nonprofit that they're passionate about, and we'll provide them that licensing for that purpose. So Esri is a very established and committed organization. It was grown very carefully over very many years, and our success is fundamental to the fact that we believe that our existence is to serve our users. A very real relationship. direct feedback on what's needed, what's not working, what is working, and we use that feedback to reinvest significantly in the advance of the GIS technology in order to advance the field and make a difference. It's a sustainable business model that has been working for over 48 years and has grown very carefully, but over an extremely long period. You might think of Esri as a huge corporation, and the fact is, really Esri wouldn't exist if not for Jack and Laura Dangerman. So in their academic experience, in Jack's history growing up, which you'll hear just a little bit more about in a moment, they had a vision that this technology, if we better understood our world, if we had better tools for understanding what's happening and guiding our actions in a more constructive way, that it could make a real difference. And I hope you've seen from some of the examples today that that's happening. I hope you see that your work is part of that. Now, Jack and Laura are also at a place at their lives where after these 48 years of really tireless focus at Esri, they both are in the office every day if they're not traveling. Jack and Laura run Esri to this very day. But they're at a place where they can begin to make some investments that reflect our values. And last winter, they made a very large commitment to an organization called the Nature Conservancy to preserve a very large section of remaining pristine coastline in California. This is an area of very high biodiversity value. It is over 8 miles of coastline. If you've visited Southern California and seen the population pressure on our environment, there are very few places like this left. And we were thrilled as part of Esri to see Jack and Laura make this commitment. Those are my photographs. I took my family there. There's a little campground nearby. And it was such a wonderful feeling to be part of this organization and to see those two act in this way at the level of donation that they made to this specific purpose. So my point is, when you see Esri talk about caring about the environment, it's truly genuine from the very, very top leadership of our organization. I wanted to share one quick video about Jack talking about his experiences as a young man.
I was brought up in a family who had started a little nursery. We grew plants, we sold plants, and we worked with customers landscaping their yards. I like to say I learned everything about business and everything about what I do in the nursery. It's about growing things and supporting customers and making people happy. My father always had this interesting story. When I was a kid, we walked by some plants that were sort of drying out, and he said, "What do you see there?" I sort of looked, I said, "Dried out plants." He says, "No, you should see watering these plants." And I don't know, it means a lot to me because it sort of says when you see a problem, you do something about it. You don't just walk by and ignore and let the plant die. You've got to be involved in it and take an action.
Be involved and take an action. So there are many reasons that I love that story and that quote, but we see it every day in working with Jack and being a part of this organization and in working with you. Our belief is that humans have never been more capable of making the right types of decisions, and that requires perhaps a new approach to collaboration. It requires perhaps sharing information and crossing boundaries in order to collaborate to address extremely complex and increasing problems. And we hope that you can leverage Esri technology and consider Esri a partner as you do this work. And we feel strongly that it's essential that now is the time that we get to work. There is so much ahead of us, both challenging as well as opportunities and the successes that we can achieve together. So my hope is that you take this time together at the UC over the next few days. You collaborate, you learn from Esri Finland, you advance your profession, you advance your knowledge of the technology, and you provide the basis for moving forward towards sustainability. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you all being here today.